Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to my presentation. I know it's just after lunch, but hopefully you will have fun and get inspired from my presentation. So the paper topic is, what if properties are owned by no one or everyone? Blockchain enables engineered ownership. First, I will explain why I think ownership is very important. It's very important to talk about. So ownership has always been in the center of debate throughout history and nowadays. In history, ownership has been divided our ideology. I mean, since the beginning of our civilization, Plato is in favor of common property and common interests and pursuits, and Aristotle is in supportive of private ownership, and which could possibly promote virtues such as responsibilities and prudence. This has been created a separation of ideology that created basically the foundation of the difference in the political system, such as communism and capitalism nowadays. And I take another turn to a more business field. Like nowadays that people, we have been talking in this decade a lot about sharing economy. And 2 years ago in World Economic Forum, they had a bold statement that says, you will own nothing and you will be happy. So this debate about ownership and sharing on platforms has been in the center of debate throughout history and nowadays in our society. That's why I think it's super important that we talk about ownership. And at the same time, blockchain has been talked about as the technology that transforms ownership. And blockchain, when we talk about blockchain, you almost cannot escape talking about ownership. First, NFT, non-fungible tokens, are these little tokens on the right lower side. That is a digital token that signifies ownership of a work of digital art or media. And when we talk about blockchain, we also talk about it's part of the movement of Web3. Web3 is contrasts to Web 1, which is the possibility to write, Web 2, the possibility to read and write, and move on to Web 3, that we read, write, and own the internet. And when we talk about blockchain, there's also the DAO as decentralized autonomous organization. It's basically a possibility that provides community co-ownership, a new form of organizational structure. So blockchain is all about ownership. Yet, the concept of ownership is very poorly understood. We don't know what is ownership fundamentally, and what is the existing theory of ownership, or how can blockchain transform the built environment through ownership. That's why today I take you through my agenda, also how I constructed my paper. So we first destroy together the concept of ownership, reconstruct it through property rights, and then to achieve understanding of how blockchain can transform ownership in our built environment, and conceptualize a new theory called engineered ownership. First, I want you to forget about what you think you know about ownership. For example, I'm presenting in front of my own computer, and I think I know that this computer is mine, but if I would put it into repair, and then I would lose accessibility for my computer. Then by then, who owns my computer anymore? That's first question. Like we always assume that ownership is about that we own the physical property, but it's not. So ownership, first I will present you that ownership is almost a meaningless word. Ownership does not describe the degree, the scope, the mode of owning, or the condition of the object of the properties. And there's a growing complexity even on top of that ambiguity of ownership, because our society has grown more and more complex, and there is an economical and organizational structure complexity add on top of it. For example, the stock market, that we own a share of a company, but we don't necessarily own the rights of governing, but we could if you obtain a bigger share. So that's all this organizational structure complexity add on another layer of complexity into the concept of ownership. And ownership is not really about physical possession. Nowadays, since our value creation in a society has moved on from tangible goods to intangible goods, the value creation has been moved on to digital properties and assets. And this creates even more challenging into the understanding what ownership is really about. So how do we reconstruct our understanding of ownership, since it's really not about all the things that I presented? So I turned into property rights, because property and its right is the most formalized and legalized system of rights that gives people legal ownership of control of valuable things. Through studying property rights, I think maybe we can understand ownership better. So like property rights, ownership actually is informational. Here I use an example, for example, a land. When you think you own the land, you don't own the physical land itself. Rather, you own the information about the ownership, which is the boundary. Like when you declare your ownership of a land, you declare that this boundary is mine instead of that the soil and stones are yours. So ownership is essentially informational. And ownership is also a series of rights. In legal terms, there are a concept called bundle of rights, that each ownership consists a list of rights that you have with it. For example, my computer again, I not only own it, I own the rights also presenting a presentation on it. I also have the right to maintain it. I have the right to destroy it. These are all a series of rights that attach to the ownership. And each ownership rights also has properties. They are objects of properties, articulation of use, subject of properties, and transfer of rights and enforceability of rights. This is attached to every single right that within the series of rights in the scope of ownership. And also each ownership right has characteristics. It can be very flexible, it can be exclusive. What's the quality of the rights that you have? Also, it can be transferred. It also has divisibility. You can break it down into many ownerships, or there's also durability into your every single rights that attach to ownership. Also, ownership is a complex system of system. On the right side is a graph that created by Schlegel and Ostrom, who used the bundle of rights to list all the rights actually attached to a common land. So basically, she categorized that the rights to 5 categorization, which are access rights, withdrawal rights, management rights, exclusion rights, and alienation rights. And access, withdrawal are operational rights. Management, exclusion, alienation is collective decision rights. And with this categorization, you basically create a structure of organization that give different access to different people. So when you have 2 rights, and basically you are only an authorized user. But when you have all 5 rights, you are owner. And this basically is a foundation of all the organizational governance structure within our society. And through this reconstructs what is ownership, that is a series of rights, is a complex system of system that we can reach an understanding of what blockchain really can do for ownership. So on a basic level, blockchain really provides ownership with a system transparency, immutable records, digitized ownership, streamlined registration, and provide extreme transferability and flexibility to the system. And on top of that, blockchain can even do more to ownership. Blockchain can tokenize, fractionize ownership, create unstoppable incentive to ownership system, and have digital governance on top of it with these incentive systems. Also, machine ownership. With my PhD, I would like to address the possibility of machine ownership, which is also the least research about blockchain and ownership. So with machine ownership, I literally mean that I think everyone knows about smart contract. So actually smart contract is not only contain logic, but also it's a account that could have treasury and finance inside. So which means that the logic and treasury can be in one place, and they create a machine ownership. The logic and treasury on one place, and it creates self-owned or common-owned digital assets, properties, and processes with blockchain. And this goes back to my first question in the title of my paper. What if properties are owned by everyone or no one? Because blockchain provides this opportunity that with the intelligent system, you could have complete self-owned machine ownership, or you have a complete common-based, everyone like DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization-based ownership. And then with this possibility of machine ownership, I see that there's a need to enclose this gap between that the fundamental value and virtues, what we know about ownership, and the emergence of digital properties, machine participation, and ownership, even in the future of intelligent society. So I conceptualize engineered ownership as a bridge between what we know about ownership and what's the legalized, formalized ownership, and the future of intelligent society that we're walking into in the built environment. So for engineered ownership, there's 5 characteristics that all the rights, like I presented before, like property rights, all the rights are relational and they're interplay between each rights. It's a complex system of system, and they include the possibility of non-human participation, and in the built environment is a cyber-physical integrated system. So that's about the end of my presentation. Hopefully I walk you through how I destroy the concept of ownership, reconstructed what is ownership through property rights, and we reach understanding how blockchain can systematically, fundamentally transform ownership and conceptualize the theory of engineered ownership. And I have some closing remarks. Since I was here for the summer school, every single, I think, scholars here has been talking about that. The data is king. And we have been wanting to move our industry from product-based to process-based. But I'd like to ask a question. Who owns the data and the processes? And so I believe in a decentralized distributed future for the built environment and for everyone. So that's why I constructed engineer ownership as the base layer. And I believe that blockchain is a key technology to transform this. What about you? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very